One of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Well, hello there. Welcome to Brazier. Some fast-paced news from 4 until 6 this sweltering Monday. In the next hour, 5 candidates will drop to 4 this evening as Conservative MPs vote for who they want to be their next leader and Prime Minister of the UK. Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak provided us with a salty debate last night. In an hour, Tory MPs will start voting again. Who is for the chop this time? Boris Johnson flew in an RAF fighter jet in pictures released this morning. Extraordinary pictures. In the next hour, however, he could fall to earth. He's facing a vote of no confidence in the Commons in the admittedly unlikely event of a Conservative defeat. A general election would be triggered. Boris Johnson's statement on that confidence vote live from the House of Commons in around half an hour. Also, a red alert for extreme weather is in place across England and an amber warning for Wales and southern Scotland as temperatures reach the high 30s. The heat causing disruption on public transport, passengers told not to travel unless they have to. Our reporter Jeff Moody is out there sweating in the sunshine so you don't have to. Let us know how hot it is where you are, how you're coping or enjoying the heat. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. With me for the next 2 hours, the journalist and author Ella Whelan. But first, we've got the latest news headlines with Polly.
Colin, thank you. The latest on GB News. As you're probably aware, the UK is expecting its highest temperatures on record this week. Red extreme heat warnings have now been issued for millions of people right across the nation. Temperatures are forecast to hit at least 40 degrees tomorrow afternoon. The heatwave has even disrupted travel and closed schools for the next 2 days. Meteorologist John Hammond told GB News the telltale signs to look out for if you suspect heat stroke.
It's confusion, it's dizziness, it's nausea, it's headaches, and it's obviously sweatiness. But those are the symptoms of heat stress. The worry is that heat stress can quickly progress into heat exhaustion, and when that happens, you actually stop sweating. So your mechanism for getting rid of heat from the body closes down, and then your body just gets hotter and hotter and hotter. That's heat stroke, and that can be incredibly serious, and you have to rush people to the hospital at very short notice at that point.
Well, those sweltering temperatures aren't just limited to the United Kingdom. Record-breaking heat has killed more than 1,000 people across Europe. The hot and dry conditions are also fueling wildfires in Spain, France, Portugal and Greece, where thousands of firefighters are battling blazes. Experts say France is facing a heat apocalypse as more than 24,000 people search for emergency shelters. And the dangerous summer heat has police issuing fresh warnings after discovering the body of a 13-year-old boy in Northumberland. Robert Hattersley died after a day of swimming near the River Tyne yesterday. His family says he brought a smile to so many people's faces as they mourned their child. This follows the deaths of 2 other teens and a 50-year-old man near rivers in other parts of the country this week. Away from the heat, in the UK, the field of candidates in the race to replace Boris Johnson as Conservative Party leader and ultimately Prime Minister will be whittled down once again today. That's as Tory MPs vote in the 3rd secret ballot of the contest. Voting takes place between 5 and 7 o'clock this evening, with the result expected at 8. Full coverage for you here on GB News. And the candidate with the fewest votes will be eliminated. And a 3rd televised debate due to take place tomorrow night between the remaining candidates has been cancelled because Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss have declined to take part. Sky News, which had been due to host it, says Conservative MPs are said to be concerned about the damage debates are doing to the image of the party. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, says it's surprising that any of the contenders would miss an opportunity to prove themselves.
I'm astonished that those that want to be Prime Minister of the United Kingdom are pulling out of debates and out of scrutiny. I can see, based on what I've seen in the debates so far, why they want to do so, because this is a party that is out of ideas, out of purpose. They're tearing each other apart. But as I say, pulling out of a TV debate when you want to be Prime Minister doesn't show very much confidence.
In international news, Russia's state energy company Gazprom has declared force majeure on gas supplies to Europe. It says extraordinary circumstances are preventing it from fulfilling its fuelling obligations. A trading source has told the Reuters news agency it refers to the Nord Stream 1 pipeline, which delivers gas to Germany. The supply was turned off last week for routine maintenance and was due to resume on Thursday. Meanwhile, the head of Ukraine's spy agency and the top state prosecutor have been suspended while an investigation takes place after dozens of people in their organisations were found to be collaborating with Russia. President Volodymyr Zelensky said they had to take responsibility for more than 650 cases of treason, which have been opened against their staff. He said more than 60 people from both departments are now working against Ukraine in Russian-occupied territories. Here, a Conservative Police and Crime Commissioner has been blamed for driving for 6 months and for repeatedly speeding. Caroline Henry was caught breaking a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit 5 times in 12 weeks. She was elected as Nottinghamshire's Police and Crime Commissioner in May 2021 and had pledged to crack down on speeding. European bison have been introduced into the woods in Kent, where their ancestors used to roam. It's hoped they'll restore the woods and make them more resilient to climate change with their natural behaviour, grazing, felling trees, eating bark and taking dust baths. Not recommended for you or me. This is GB News, more news as it happens. Now back to Brazier.
It is 7 minutes past 4. It's very hot. Today, the contenders for the leadership of the Conservative Party will be whittled down to 4. MPs start voting in around about, just under 25 minutes from now. Last night, the 5 hopefuls went head-to-head in a second live TV debate, which saw the candidates clash, notably on their differing approaches to taxation. Here is part of what happened.
Something for nothing economics isn't Conservative, it's socialism.
Under your plans, we are predicted to have a recession because you have raised tax, it is cutting back on growth, it is preventing companies from investing, and it's taking money out of people's pockets.
And at the moment, we're getting definite promises of jam tomorrow when a lot of people are looking for bread today. And Liz, in your past, you've been both a Liberal Democrat and a Remainer. I was just wondering which one you regretted most.
My parents were left-wing activists, and I've been on a political journey ever since. I'm the only person on this stage that has won and fought a Labour seat. My constituents do not elect people who are out of touch.
It was crotchety at times, wasn't it? I wonder if the hot temperature had something to do with that. I remember Lindsay Hoyle last week losing his cool rather in the chamber. Another story. Well, as things stand, that will be the final leadership debate. There had been hustings planned for Tuesday evening on Sky News, but it was cancelled after Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss said they would not be appearing. The suggestion is, and your suggestion obviously, is that they feel the Conservative cause has been undermined by some of the personal attacks. Let's turn to our political correspondent and presenter, Tom Harwood, who is in Westminster, just across the road from the Palace of Westminster. Tom, welcome to you. Shirt sleeves order today. They start filing into vote in a shade under an hour from now.
That's right, and it's after a few days of pretty tumultuous campaigning. It feels like an awful long time ago that the previous round 2 in this contest, took place early on Thursday afternoon. Of course, at that point, Suella Braverman, remember her? She came last and therefore became eliminated. So really, if we're looking without too much skullduggery, it'll be her backers who are going to be making the difference this time around. And she's someone who seemed to be on the Brexity right of the party, which means that a Brexity right sort of candidate would be looking to mop up most of that residual support. Suella Braverman has herself endorsed Liz Truss, but also since then, of course, there have been those 2 debates. First on Channel 4 with an audience which many people thought was a little bit distorting of the process when you had a lot of audience participation and a pretty lively host of that debate as well. And then, of course, last night on ITV, which was a more policy-focused and, to some extent, a more punchy affair as well. Well, the whole conversation seems to have got a little bit more heated. No doubt the temperature might have played into that as well a little bit, but it's not just what has been happening on our TV screens. It's not just what has been happening in public and in the press and in the Sunday papers and all the rest of it, but there have been private hustings as well. Between 2 and 3:30 today, MPs in the 1922 committee sat and listened to each of those 5 candidates set out their stall and hussed up on the committee room corridor just across the road in the Palace of Westminster. And as I'm standing here in Portcullis House, the building where most MPs' offices are, you can see many MPs and advisers sitting around having hushed conversations, no doubt deciding how things will go as voting takes place this afternoon. It does really feel that this is a contest where there is a lot to play for, and I do have to say that it is understandable why those 2 people who are seen to be more front-runners in this contest, those people that might well do very well this evening, it's easy to see why Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak might have thought that no more public debates would be in their interest.
Yeah, and in terms of public debates, Prime Minister, this could be what in 20 minutes or thereabouts, it could be the last time, Tom, that he faces off across the dispatch box at Keir Starmer. I say could be, it depends on what he does next week.
This is exactly right. A lot of people raised an eyebrow when the Prime Minister last Wednesday said this is likely my last Prime Minister's questions, because how on earth would that be the case? We know all the candidates in the Tory leadership election have promised to not drop out, not do an Andrea Leadsom as it's become known, but to carry this leadership contest right the way through to the 5th of September, meaning that this Wednesday there should be Prime Minister's questions. Why wouldn't there necessarily be Prime Minister's questions? Well, there's a great deal of speculation that this Prime Minister might have a foreign trip up his sleeve, that he might want to do one last bit of statesmanship, perhaps going off to Japan. That was suggested last week. But of course, today, his valedictory moment, perhaps, in this confidence vote, we'll be hearing from him at 4:30.
Cheers, Tom. If this is perhaps a case of the Prime Minister ticking off his political bucket list before he leaves number 10, have a look at these images taken last week from Farnborough in Hampshire, but only released this morning, so it's the first sight we've had of them. You'll recognise him doing his own filming. Don't know how high that is, quite high. RAF Typhoon fighter jet, thumbs up, Prime Minister, being refuelled there. Apparently at one stage, Boris Johnson, and if you are listening on the radio rather than watching on the telly, is in the cockpit of a very expensive jet fighter, and he was given control of the joystick. It's a sort of dual control thing. Ella Whelan's alongside me to reflect on the last weeks of the Prime Minister's time at number 10. He could be forgiven for having a bit of a bucket list. He's got all the levers of the state to pull around him, and he maybe wants to have a bit of fun.
I think, you know, his bucket list is probably well ticked off if you take into consideration some of the extravagancies that have been linked to Boris Johnson's premiership. I mean, if he wants to get up in a plane and have a bit of fun, who cares? At this point, I think it probably actually highlights a sort of pointlessness of the coming few days and weeks, in which you have the kind of government in hiatus, in which it sort of seems not that extraordinary to have a Prime Minister or former Prime Minister playing around in the sky while there's some very serious things to deal with on the ground. But, you know, in relation to the leadership debate, the thing that struck me, that it really stuck in my craw last night, was when Penny Mordaunt, in her final words, turned to camera and said, I did this kind of very dramatic sigh and said, I really wish this could have been more about you than it has been about us. And that just rang so incredibly hollow. And it rings even more hollow now that the debate tonight has been cancelled. Because you think... that has been cancelled. That I think a lot of people watching recognise that there's a process here and that there's only a small number of people who are going to elect the next leader of the Conservative Party. That's fair enough, that's the process. But, you know, this does feel like an incredibly indulgent internal spat. And when you see the kind of theatrics that went on last night, I mean, you called it crotchety and salty. It was actually kind of cringy, you know, that these people turning on each other and then coming out the next day and saying, actually, that they've been slapped on the wrist by the party for doing so. It's getting a bit tiresome at this point. And actually, it's more entertaining watching Boris up in a fighter jet than it is watching them slug it out on the screen.
Let's turn to the Associate Editor of the Daily Mirror, Kevin Maguire, who can join us to give us his take. Kevin Maguire, welcome to you. We were just talking about Penny Mordaunt. I took off to go to one of those 3-day-long Italian weddings, and lovely it was too. That was Wednesday evening. And at that point, there'd just been a YouGov survey showing that Penny Mordaunt couldn't be caught. You know, if you looked at the votes where the membership were going to vote, she was way, way out in front. Ella says it's all a bit juvenile. Is there not another way of looking at this, which says it's politics in the raw? You've got a tiny electorate, admittedly, but it's in flux because it's learning things about these candidates.
Yeah, but 200,000 people, the Conservative Party membership in a country of 67 million. I can't do the percentage, but it'll be 0.0 something will decide who is the next Prime Minister of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And we saw them, as you say, in the raw yesterday. And it was extraordinary, really, because you've got 5 of them, and they clearly hate and detest each other far more than Labour do at the moment, because they can all see the prize, the crown of the premiership without the need for a general election is there within grasp. And I would suggest 3 of them, Sunak, Truss and Mordaunt, have a realistic expectation they may be crowned Prime Minister. So they're prepared to fight very, very dirty. But at the same time, I can see why Sunak and Truss, who are both really, 2 of those 3, both thinking they will gain by not having another debate, want to skip it because they see the damage that is created to themselves and the Conservative Party. And throughout this process, the clear winner has been Keir Starmer and the Labour Party, because voters will not forget some of the backbiting and bloodletting. And also, Labour has a bulging file of attacks on whoever wins, and they're all blue-on-blue attacks, so they can just quote back what Conservative colleagues said of the next Prime Minister.
It's the public nature of the personal attacks, isn't it? Because, I mean, if you think back to the days that you covered, Kevin, still covering politics, obviously, but you think back to the Brown-Blair tussle for supremacy. It was ugly. It was a reminder, just as we saw last night, that top politicians want to get to the top. They don't much mind how they get there. But it was sort of conducted in private. I make the point, by the way, because, of course, there wasn't a general election to elevate Gordon Brown. He succeeded. So that happens, in a sense, regardless of party. But it was kept private.
It was. You're quite right, Colin. The Blair Brown years, the TBGBs, they used to be called, were mainly in private. There would be coded criticism in public, but it was covered up, essentially. Now we're seeing it in the raw, in public. And I think in one way, that is good. If that is how they feel, we should see it. And the debate should have gone ahead tomorrow. But there is an expectation, I think, from Conservative MPs, Conservative supporters, members, voters, that perhaps they could behave a little more civilly towards each other. Now, I'm applauding from the sidelines. I'm not being saying, look, here's an etiquette, you got to follow it. I'm in one way relishing the naked hatred that is on display because it must be real and they can't cover it up. But I'm not sure it does the governing party any good at all.
Kevin Maguire, good to talk to you, Kevin. Appreciate your time. Now, the UK is facing a heat wave, as you know, temperatures in the high 30s this afternoon. Some parts of England forecast to exceed 40 by tomorrow. The country's under its first red warning for extreme heat, meaning the fit and healthy are potentially at risk of injury or worse. The Met Office warning, it includes an area including London, Leeds, Birmingham, Cambridge, Manchester and York. Today and tomorrow, in other words, most of England. An amber warning for Wales and the Scottish borders, also in place. The heat causing disruption on public transport. It's not just the unions that do that, you see. Rail passengers have been told not to travel unless their journeys are essential, with widespread changes to schedules, as most of the people who work here say. But the reaction of government's being criticised as catastrophising by commentators who point out that holidaymakers travel abroad to enjoy temperatures currently available at home. GBNews' South West of England reporter Jeff Moody is in Bournemouth. Jeff, the beaches there are normally crammed. Have people stayed away, I wonder?
No, I actually had a bet with one of our producers last night. I said, I don't think anyone will come. I think everyone will stay at home and put their heads in the fridge. And she said, no, everyone will come to the beach. Well, she was right. The beach is packed. The Met Office had said stay away, but the people of Bournemouth, they haven't got that memo. They have poured into the beach. There's people everywhere. I keep getting these wafts, Colin, of fish and chips. Why anyone would have fish and chips today, I really don't know. Well, speaking to some of the people that are on the beach, I've asked them why they're here in this heat. And the answer they're giving me is, well, you know, this is scaremongering. We have been abroad before. We know what hot weather is like. We are capable of looking after ourselves, and we're British, and the British carry on no matter what the weather may be. But this weather isn't British. That's the thing. This is hotter than the Sahara. This is hotter than the Bahamas. It's hotter than Athens. And what the Met Office is doing is it's not being a nanny state. It's not telling people what to do. It's giving solid advice, because heat stroke is a serious thing. I had it a few years ago after a very nice day on Brighton Beach, and I tell you, I was ill for quite some time. I was in hospital for 2 days with it. It is a serious condition. They're saying that fit and healthy people could collapse in this heat as well. It can lead to strokes, it can lead to heart attacks as your body works hard to try and adjust to this heat. I've had people running up this hill like they're Kate Bush just now, and I don't see why they would be doing that at this time of the day. But, you know, each to their own, and people are certainly having a good time down here, and we just hope that they feel well when they get home. If you do want to come out, obviously the same rules apply that we hear everywhere. Drink plenty of water, keep the sunscreen on, and don't wear waistcoats because it's really hot.
And Jeff, lest anybody emails in, as they will, saying not necessarily a good idea to send a reporter who's susceptible to heat stroke to stand in the heat all day. I'm sure you'll have to find some cover very soon. Jeff, thanks very much indeed. Jeff Moody. We're joined by Jim Dale, who's a senior meteorologist at British Weather Services. Jim, welcome to you. How do we answer that charge that this is catastrophising on one level?
No apologies whatsoever. OK, there are some people who want to be out there and do what they want to do and roast and find that maybe tonight they regret it to some degree. There are others who need the advice. There are others who, if we talk about the vulnerable, the young, the old, Look, advice doesn't do anybody any harm whatsoever. You can dismiss it if you wish to. You can follow it. We're all made up of different requirements and needs. And I think the advice that's gone out, first of all, from the meteorologist, then from the health community, finally, last and about time, the government saying a few words. No, I think it's all been in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, of course, how the advice then extrapolates into practical action is another thing, isn't it? So, for instance, it was noteworthy this morning on the front of one of the papers, they were saying kids ought to go to school, which on first blush sounds a bit odd. But then, of course, you realise that in some respects it's the safest, we talk about safest place for them. They're going to be inside controlled environment, perhaps a bit of air conditioning if they're left to their own devices. They might get too hot.
That obviously depends on the school and it depends on the workplace, but it isn't just about the B bit, in other words, A to B, it's the getting there and getting back. People will be leaving work now, maybe left a bit earlier, but this is the peak temperature time. We're around, I think the top temperature at the moment is 37.5 at Cavendish in Suffolk. If I could just, your reporter there was quoting a few places. We're, at this moment, although it's early morning in California, Death Valley was 38 when I last looked a few minutes ago. So 38 v 37.5. Death Valley, you see, it's got a right name, hasn't it? But there we go. So yeah, these temperatures probably in this next hour are going to push up another little bit, maybe towards that 40 mark. Certainly tomorrow looks even hotter. So that 40 is likely to be surpassed. We will see.
Jim Dale, appreciate your time. Thanks for your advice. Thanks a lot. Ella Whelan alongside me. It need not be the usual sort of binary thing between catastrophising, scaremongering and the opposite of those things. There is a sort of happy medium, isn't it? Where you take the advice and make a choice.
Yeah, I think, I don't think anyone sensible would argue that giving advice on something that is unprecedented, unprecedented is a word that gets used all the time, but quite clearly you only have to step outside the door. We
started recording temperatures, I think, in 1900, so it's not that unprecedented.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's a shock to people because we haven't had heat like this for a very long time. People keep talking about 1976. I mean, that was a fair bit of a while ago, so I think it's fair enough to say it's hot. And some of the advice around heat stroke is fair enough because that can take people by surprise. But I do think that it's important to point out that the politics of this is relevant because we're still in that kind of pandemic phase, pandemic kind of mindset, which is that unless we're told exactly what to do and make everything kind of into a public health emergency, there's a suggestion that people are going to drop like flies. And I think actually most people have been to Torremolinos or wherever else and have been out in, the kind of whole thing about mad dogs and Englishmen. Yeah. The English particularly like going out in the heat.
But as long as the government doesn't start mandating things and leaves it to us to decide, they can make all the weather warnings they want. That's great. We can then listen to that and make an informed judgment. That's different from mandating, I don't know, that you will stay off work because it's really hot.
No, absolutely. But we know that in relation to things like smoking or kind of lifestyle choices, that there is a fine line that gets kind of tread between just that helpful, friendly advice, things like labels about alcohol on the back of bottles and stepping into mandating. So, I think, stay indoors, if you want to go outside, drink lots of water, the sensible stuff that everybody knows we do on holiday. And, it'll be over soon. It's England. It never lasts very long.
Cheers. Ella, thanks very much indeed. Coming up, by the time he's come back after the commercial break, the Prime Minister, you saw him earlier, heavens above, in the cockpit of a fighter jet. Well, he's down to earth, not necessarily with a bump, but he's going to be at the dispatch box, facing off, another dreadful phrase I should use less. But anyway, Keir Starmer and he, potentially for the last time, in the House of Commons, vote of no confidence in the government. Boris Johnson will be at the dispatch box live from 4:30. We'll bring that to you. Stay with us.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go? Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
There's a vote of no confidence in the government. Boris Johnson will be on his feet in the next few minutes. We'll take you there straight away live when he appears. Meanwhile, the Commons Affairs Select Committee says there is, quote, no clear evidence the government's plan to send migrants to Rwanda will deter those attempting to cross English Channel. The chair of that committee, the Labour MP, Diana Johnson, accused ministers of hunting for radical new policies that might make good headlines, but did little to stem the flow of people attempting the dangerous, well, sometimes dangerous journey. More than 14,000 migrants have crossed the Channel on small dinghies this year, some of them not so small. In response to the report, the Home Office said there was no silver bullet to the global migration crisis, but that the government must do everything that can be done to fix the broken asylum system. The former Director General of the UK Border Forces, Tony Smith, who joins us now, as he often does. Tony, welcome to you. Nice to have you with us today. Home Affairs Select Committee feel that Rwanda's a non-starter. What say you?
Hi, Colin. Well, it has been up to now because the courts haven't let us send anybody there. And so I don't think we can expect any real evidence until the first plane takes off. But as you know, Colin, this has been a very protracted legal battle between the Home Office and the courts. And one would hope that sooner or later we will get the authorities we need to put people on the plane to Rwanda, and that may well act as a deterrent. But at the moment, we haven't seen a significant reduction in numbers, probably because the migrants don't believe us.
No. The question remains, doesn't it? If not Rwanda, then what? And we know that Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, has looked into all kinds of different methods, whether it's the jet skis, pushing the boats back. Well, somebody might drown. Where will that leave us? The French, sometimes cooperative, sometimes not. The people who are condemning Rwanda need to provide a viable alternative.
Well, yes, they do, Colin. We've spoken about this before. And the real problem with immigration controls in this country is that we've lost the capacity to return anybody anywhere when they can't come here or they can't stay here. As I've told you before, you know, back in the days of the immigration service, we found people coming to our shores illegally. We would simply document them and put them on a plane home, and that would be the end of it. But now we've got a very complicated legal structure. We've got asylum applications, HR applications, and even at the end of all that, we have to apply for travel documents to send people back, and many countries won't comply with that. So, you know, this is. I don't think Rwanda was ever the policy of first choice, but I think they do need to look for something radical, Colin. And you know, this is a country that, on the face of it, has said yes, we will accept people. They can come and live here. I think they'll be looking for more countries like that, and I hope it's top of the new Prime Minister's agenda that this is linked as a very serious foreign policy issue to our relationships overseas with other countries, because in my view they should take people back, particularly when they're not entitled to come here.
And just on that final point, I mean, does it strike you, it certainly does strike me, and I imagine it will strike many of our viewers and listeners, that the government's not joined up on this? When you're dealing with regimes that refuse to accept back people whose asylum claims have failed or perhaps have been deported for crimes committed that result in a sentence of longer than 12 months in this country. Why are we still giving some of those countries literally certainly tens of millions, but sometimes hundreds of millions in foreign aid, for instance?
Yeah, exactly, Colin. You know, this is so important, isn't it, to the British public and to our own sovereignty and our protection of our borders, that it really needs to be a very serious foreign policy issue. And it's not something the Border Force or the Home Office can fix on their own. So I agree with you. It is really important. There's a dedicated line of effort right across Whitehall. Message goes out to countries around the world. If you want to deal with us, and most countries do want to deal with us, you're going to have to take migrants back if they come here in this way. And I think that's what the government should focus on next. Obviously, if they can't do that, they're going to continue to look for places like Rwanda that will accept arrangements where we can send people. But ideally, you know, we would get that foreign policy leadership and steer so that these things returns can be linked to broader foreign policy issues such as trade deals, as you say, overseas aid and wider relations, because it's really important. And I think, you know, the Home Office get beaten up quite badly on this, but I think people need to understand that it's not entirely within their gift to do a deal with countries like Pakistan and Rwanda and Eritrea and so on. It is a Foreign Office issue, and it's really important that they engage, as well as other parts of Whitehall, in a concerted cross-government effort. And I hope that's what happens, Colin.
Tony Smith is the former Director General of the UK Border Force. Tony, appreciate your time. Thanks very much indeed. And we're going to bring you the rest of the day's news now. Do stand by, though, for that appearance of Boris Johnson, no confidence vote, and more about the Conservative leadership contest. Voting begins in 25 minutes. Latest news headlines with Polly first.
Colin, thank you. As you've been hearing, the UK is expecting its highest temperatures in recorded history this week. Red extreme heat warnings have been issued for millions of people across the country. Kew Gardens in West London has seen the hottest day of the year so far, reaching 37.5 degrees. The heatwave has disrupted travel and schools. Luton Airport is now suspending flights due to the high temperatures causing runway defects. And those sweltering temperatures aren't just limited to the UK. Record-breaking heat has killed more than 1,000 people across Europe. The hot and dry conditions are fueling wildfires in Spain, France, Portugal and Greece, where thousands of firefighters are battling the flames. Experts say France is facing a heat apocalypse as more than 24,000 people search for emergency shelters. Here in the UK, the field of candidates in the race to replace Boris Johnson as Conservative Party leader will be whittled down again today, as Colin was saying. Tory MPs are voting in the third secret ballot of the contest. The candidate with the fewest votes will be eliminated. And a third televised debate between the candidates has been cancelled because Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss have declined to take part. Sky News, which had been due to host the debate, says Conservative MPs are said to be concerned about the damage debates are doing to the image of their party. You're up to date on TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. With GB News, Brazier back in a bit.
Well, if the number of emails you're sending us on the Tory leadership are anything to go by, there is still a lot of interest out there in what's happening. And as I say, they start voting, the Conservative MPs who are choosing their next leader and Prime Minister, in about 24 minutes from now. We're also on standby for the Prime Minister's appearance at the Dispatch Box 2. Vote of no confidence in his government today. He'll be speaking. Yvonne says, none of them, in my view, will come close to Boris. Boris had people involved in politics who were previously disaffected. I've always said Boris is like a mad professor with strokes of genius, and this lot don't come near. Annette says these people are not fit to lead the Conservative Party, let alone be Prime Minister. They certainly won't get the Conservatives into government at the next general election. I am a party member and cannot see myself wanting to vote for any of them. Carl says outside the London bubble, the public will not vote Tory in a general election with Sunak as leader. Marion says, I want Penny Mordaunt for PM. She didn't slag anyone off on TV and she knows about Scotland. Ella Whelan's alongside me. What do you make of it all, Ella?
Well, it's one of those things which is, you know, you have to ask what's going to be new with any of these candidates. And we've had several kind of rows about, you know, it seems like there are divisions in relation to something like taxation. And it seems like there are quite radical differences. But actually, when it comes down to it, if you just zoom out a little bit and think there's a real crisis happening at the moment, cost of living crisis, fuel crisis, big issues around food security, there needs to be some radical change in this country. And all we're talking about is tax tweaking. And really, actually, what it comes down to is, what was it that Tom Tugendhat said, jam tomorrow, bread today. But that really, it sums it up. It's a very kind of small fry debate. They're all pretty similar around issues relating to, we haven't had that much detail about some of the other stuff. Housing hasn't come up. And I know housing is my big bugbear and I like to go on about it. But for most people, that's a really central policy issue. So at the end of all of this, we'll have someone that looks a bit different and we'll have someone that perhaps conducts themselves differently to Boris Johnson. But the politics with a capital P of the Conservative Party isn't going to change.
Just finally, on the point about how ill-tempered or otherwise all this, I made myself read Polly Toynbee in The Guardian. It wasn't an easy thing to do, but I read through it, and she was saying, look, this is awful. The degree of hatred between these candidates does politics no service. And the suggestion was that all was sweetness and light in the Labour Party. And I thought, well, did she miss that stuff where a Labour MP who got into trans rights and the use of the word woman had to be given, I think it was almost police protection to get into the Labour Party conference? And my point isn't to be snide about the Labour Party, it's just to make the point that it's politics. People disagree with each other. That's the way it works.
Yeah, I really am tired of this whole suggestion. People sort of pearl clutching about the tenor of the debate. It could have been nasty. I've been on panels that have been nasty. I mean, you want a bit of life in these people, and actually a lot of it was incredibly wooden. That's why I kind of said it was cringy watching some of them turn on each other and try and puff their chests up to have a go. It was pretty inauthentic. And, the Labour Party has just come out of the whole kind of, the Corbyn era in which there were knives in the front, knives in the back. Every Labour MP was kind of briefing against someone else every week. Politics is a dirty business. And I think what voters care about is not whether they personally get along, but whether they can cohere together to have a political project. The Labour Party doesn't have that. It's divided on the issue of whether or not it knows what a woman is. And the Conservative Party obviously is just airing its dirty laundry out in public at the moment. So, I tend to come down on a plague on both their houses in this respect, because people don't care whether or not you want to have, tea and cake with each other after the debate. They care about whether or not you're going to agree to implement the kind of laws or policies that will make a difference to our lives.
Ella, for now, thanks very much indeed. We're going to try and squeeze a debate in before Boris Johnson gets to his feet. In last night's Tory leadership debate, one candidate, Kemi Badenoch, pledged to change net zero targets that would damage the economy if she was voted in as new leader of the party and Prime Minister.
The truth is, Julie, we set a target for when none of us will be here to be accountable for it. If there are things in the plan that will bankrupt this country, I will change them. If there are things in the plan that will make life difficult for ordinary people, I will change them. I do believe in climate change, but we have to do it in a way that is sustainable and that will lead other countries. If we damage our economy, they will not follow us, and then we will not solve the problem.
Well, the other candidates also pledged to meet the 2050 target set by the government. So our question today, is it time for the government to, as Kemi Badenoch suggests, ditch that net zero target? Well, here's somebody who very much, I imagine, agrees with that, the Deputy Head of Net Zero Watch, Andrew Montford, and Senior Climate Lecturer at Sheffield Hallam University, John Grant. John, we'll give you the first word because I'm guessing you very much think Kemi Badenoch's idea is a bad one. She's not a climate change denier, she says. She just thinks that this has been rushed through and it's an act of economic self-harm.
Well, the economics in this are clear. The longer we delay in acting on the climate change issues and the zero carbon issue, the more expensive it's going to be in the long run. These numbers are eye-watering. I wish we didn't have to spend them. Who would want to spend between 1% and 2% of the GDP on this? But if we don't, by the time we reach 2050 or maybe before, we're looking at 3% and maybe as much as 7% on that. So we're going to lose out. It is an economic pariah if we don't push for this zero carbon, because the impact is going to be extraordinary. It's already started to be felt, and it isn't going to get any less. If doing nothing is doing something, it will make things worse. I wish doing nothing would keep things the way they are, but that isn't how it works. Doing nothing will mean that we will continue to be worse, and worse economically, environmentally, socially, and in terms of our health. all of these things, and especially for the poorer people in our society and the wider world.
Whether it's the cost of living crisis or whether it's the words you've had in the ears of politicians as part of your campaigning at Net Zero Watch, it would appear from what Kemi Badenoch said last night that you are getting somewhere.
Yeah, I think we are getting somewhere. I think Kemi Badenoch has said some things that badly need to be said. They always say that it's a bad thing for politics when everybody agrees on something, and for the last 20 years, essentially all political parties have agreed that net zero or full decarbonisation is a good thing, and they haven't questioned it. Now, if I could just sort of pick up on something that John said, he's sort of essentially put out the official IPCC line on what the cost of doing nothing is, and he talked about 3% of GDP. That's a figure I recognise. I'm pretty comfortable with that figure. He also said that we're going to spend 1 to 2% of GDP addressing that. The problem is that is nonsense. That figure comes from the Committee on Climate Change. I've analysed that figure. I spent 2 years getting them to release their calculations under the Freedom of Information Act. The reason they didn't want to release them is that they are a nonsense. If you actually look, there's been estimates put out by, for example, the management consultancy McKinsey, who have said that the capital cost alone is going to be 12% of GDP every year. If you add in the operating costs, you're probably doubling it. These are extraordinary costs. There's plenty of
Andrew Montford. Let me just before we move on, I just want to turn to John Grant, because to describe the Committee on Climate Change's findings as nonsense deserves the right of reply. John Grant.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are going to be variations. I don't recognise such a number as 12% on that one. And what you need to take into account is that the investment for net zero does have benefits almost immediately, and you have to take those into account. So it isn't just spending for its own sake. This isn't just buying a new car and then watching it slowly degrade over time. This is investing in our infrastructure, in our homes, that mean that people don't have to struggle with their heating bills, with their energy bills, if we can bring the amount of energy that those buildings consume right down. And so, you know, if you look at it as just a straight spend, and that's how much it is, then maybe it might come into something like that. But that isn't how it is. We get immediate benefits if we commit. But we're just filibustering here. Most people are just giving excuses for inaction.
Yeah. So
Andrew Montford wants to come back in. Andrew.
So one of the things the Committee on Climate Change said was that we would get a huge benefit from switching to electric vehicles. And they said if you switch from a petrol car costing £25,000, you could buy an electric car for £11,000 today. It's clearly nonsense. An electric car is £30,000, not £11,000. And this is how transparently ridiculous the official numbers are. And this is why you don't get a benefit from switching to an EV. There is no investment benefit. In fact, it costs you extra. And this is why people are feeling the pain now. And this is the issue that we have at the moment, is that the pain is hitting people right now. This winter is going to be potentially disastrous. And I think if any of those Conservative candidates are going to stand up in October, once those bills hit home, and say, we must stick to the net zero target, they'll be out of office really, really quickly.
Andrew Montford and John Grant, really appreciate your time both. Thanks very much indeed. Ella Whelan's alongside me. Do you incline to one of or both of those arguments? It's not possible to incline to both arguments, is it? I think you've got to make a choice.
I think net zero does have to be ditched, not just in relation to the kind of arguments that were put forward there about the economics of it and the financial burden that it would put on people, but I think actually more important is the political narrative behind net zero. John Grant there had Extinction Rebellion posters behind him. I mean, so much of the environmentalist argument is actually to do nothing, to contradict him. It is actually that we don't progress, stop any kind of development, particularly sort of anti-solutions, anti-nuclear, anti-fracking, any kind of discussion about, it's very hard to find a climate change denier these days. I mean, it really is very hard. It's also very hard to find someone who, enjoys kind of huffing on an exhaust pipe. People have a sensible understanding of the fact that human activity has had an impact on the planet, and most of them want to look at how things can be greener and more efficient. Who wants to live in smoggy societies and smoggy cities and things like that? But what the narrative of net zero is that we should sacrifice our living standards in order to, benefit the planet. And for the vast majority of working class people, that means there is no future of hope for you for making your lives any better. And that's a very depressing prospect.
Just as a lefty, I mean, can I just call you a lefty, for simplicity's sake? What do you make of someone like James Delingpole, who talks about I think it's watermelons he talks about. So they're green on the outside and red on the inside. And he thinks that a large proportion of the net zero agenda is essentially a Trojan's horse to reshape society in a more Marxist image.
I don't think James Delingpole would know what a Marxist is if it kicked him up the backside. I mean, he really doesn't have a clear understanding of that. And no, I think this is a real actual misunderstanding, which is that, the idea that environmentalists are Marxists or have any interest in any kind of working class politics is a fallacy, because the central idea of environmentalism and the extremes of Extinction Rebellion are exceedingly bourgeois. I mean, they really are drippingly middle class, because the whole idea is that a select elite in society would decide how the masses live. Now, that doesn't smack of kind of Lenin or Karl to me. And I think it becomes a kind of infantile discussion which misses the key point, which is that whatever your political persuasion, you have to ask whether or not you believe a society's main driver should be to make its citizens' lives better. And I think we've completely lost that in the context of net zero.
I think we'll have to get James Delingpole on. Whenever somebody says he deserves a kick in the backside, it's a right of reply, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I can give it to him.
Ella, for now, thanks very much indeed. If you're listening, James, do come on. Not for the kick in the back, to come on. Top stories for you this afternoon. The UK is set to see its hottest day on record. Temperatures forecast to hit over 40 degrees C. That's tomorrow. Today it's in the high 30s. The Met Office issuing that red extreme heat warning for today and tomorrow. Much of England from London up to Northumberland, pretty much. The heat causing widespread travel disruption. Rail passengers being told to only travel when it's essential. MPs will vote for a third time they'll start voting in about 10 minutes. Literally 10 minutes from now, as they select the final candidates to become the next Prime Minister and Conservative leader. The list of contenders will go down from 5 to 4. The result is expected at 8 tonight. And a ban on heading football by football players in matches at under 12 level is to be trialled by the Football Association. Follows research suggesting former footballers more likely to die from brain disease than other people. We've been appealing for your pictures and stories on the heat, both good and bad. Les sent us this picture at home, having a Spanish lunch, gazpacho, followed by a glass of Vina de Verona, red wine mixed with lemonade. Good tip. Laurie says is by the beach, enjoying a coffee and a Panama hat, apparently. Lee, who's in Glasgow, relaxing by the beautiful by the canal. Keep them coming in, please. Much more coming up. We'll bring you the Prime Minister defending the government's record. Vote of no confidence scheduled in the House of Commons. Might be the last time we see Boris Johnson squaring up to Keir Starmer. And also, the voting begins. The latest round of the contest to select the next Conservative Party leader and Prime Minister. That starts in a little over 8 minutes. Stay with us.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. The heat that we're expecting on Monday night and Tuesday is very far from typical summer hot spell kind of weather. This is unprecedented, record-breaking heat. It's come up from the south and temperatures have risen during Monday. A very hot day widely. Tuesday is going to be significantly hotter in many places, and there's little cool down overnight. On Monday night, some cloud into the north and the west, some showers into the northwest of Scotland, where it will be cooler, but across much of the night, temperatures remaining in virtually all of the UK, high teens, low 20s, and in some spots, mid-20s. So the fact that we've had that heat build up through the day and then very difficult to cool down overnight, very difficult to get fresh air into people's homes. And of course, our homes aren't built to cool down. Well, that's what makes this heat so concerning. Temperatures shooting up then on Tuesday with peaks of mid to high 30s widely from southern Scotland into much of England and Wales, and 40 or 41 Celsius is possible from London to Lincolnshire. Exceptional, record-breaking levels of heat, which are likely to cause impacts to people's health and to the UK's infrastructure, given the fact that they are so far above anything we've experienced previously. There is an area of showers that will move in from the west and then push into eastern parts of England, southern Scotland during Tuesday night. And for the start of Wednesday, well, a bit more comfortable. Most places 17 to 19 Celsius. Having seen those showers go through, we've got cooler air arriving for Wednesday. There'll be some sunshine for the start of Wednesday. Early showers in the east of Scotland, perhaps turning into longer spells of rain here. 1 or 2 showers for the west of Scotland, Northern Ireland, but also some showers and some heavy thunderstorms possibly in the south of England. It will stay hot in the east of England on Wednesday, much cooler elsewhere, and all places by Thursday.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Now, within the next 5 minutes or thereabouts, Conservative MPs will start voting once again on who it is they are backing to be their next party leader and ultimately Prime Minister come September. The result, it'll take a little bit, 8 o'clock for that, and we'll find out then who the final 4 are in the running for number 10, from 5 to 4. Alicia Kearns is the Conservative MP for Rutland and Melton and is backing Penny Mordaunt. She joins me from Westminster, as you see. Alicia Kearns, welcome to you. Penny Mordaunt, when I was last in the studio on Wednesday, I think we just got that YouGov survey saying if it went to the membership, she almost couldn't be caught. She had twice as much support as the next nearest candidate. Since then, I read, I mean, this was in the Daily Mail, admittedly, that her support has imploded.
I'm not sure that's quite the case, and obviously we're not even at the stage yet where it comes to membership. Look, this is what happens in all competitions, you know, things rise and fall, but the fact is that Penny definitely has the momentum, and when it comes to colleagues in Parliament, you know, I've had more and more colleagues reaching out to me saying, do you know what, watching Penny, listening to Penny, I can see she's got a plan, I can see she really cares, and I can see that she's the only one that's charting a very sensible and measured way forward. So actually I think the momentum is still very much with us.
What did you make, as a backbencher, Alicia Kearns, what did you make of last night's TV debate? Are you surprised that it would appear that the two front runners, we can call them that, can't? Well, no, we can't, can we? But anyway, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak have decided they won't take part in tomorrow's scheduled TV debate. A suggestion perhaps that it was all getting too unseemly, ammunition for Labour, pretty unedifying stuff.
Look, Liz and Rishi have got to make the decision that they think is right for them. But I think Penny's been very clear throughout this that we're not just electing the new leader of the Conservative Party, we're electing the new Prime Minister. And so she thinks having this public discussion is very important. As you know, at her launch, she took questions from any media who wanted to ask it. She's been very open. She's done sit-down interviews. I know other candidates haven't necessarily had the opportunity or have chosen not to. But I think Penny thinks that this public discussion is really important. And look, you know, I think that's why colleagues continue to come to me and say, Penny's really got something, because she's not allowing herself to go down this rabbit hole of blue on blue, attacking one another, which actually all that does is help the opposition. It's not the kind of politics I like to see, and that's why I've said since she came forward to be the leader that she would represent the down-to-earth, honest, sincere and compassionate politics that I want to see more of and less of the game playing.
Have you been struck by the acerbity of some of the commentary? I mean, directed towards her, from someone like Lord Frost? Not alone, but someone of the stature of Lord Frost making remarks, making it pretty clear that he really doesn't think that she's up to snuff.
Look, Penny has enormous respect for Lord Frost, and I think colleagues will do what they think is right. But I think people have been very struck by the fact that Penny has fought a positive campaign consistently. And the attacks we're seeing on Penny they're not something that I recognise. They're not something that the opposition recognise when I talk to them. But it's also not the kind of thing that is recognised by colleagues who served in cabinet with her or as ministers. So I think it is disappointing that people have chosen to go down those personal attacks. But for example, you've seen people like David Davis, and he said that he came aboard Penny's campaign because he saw her at Chequers. He saw her in action, he saw her standing up for Brexit, and he said that she was someone who on the day had a plan and put it forward with integrity and decency, and that's why he's backing her. So I think ultimately, you know, colleagues are speaking up in support of her as well.
If she wins, would you like to see number 11 with David, who we were just talking about? Help me. It was David Davis. David Davis as Chancellor.
David Davis. That is very much above my pay grade. I've not been part of any conversations, but as I understand it, Penny is all about the ship behind all people who want to stand behind her, and she will make the decisions that she thinks is right. But she's been very clear. She wants to bring the party together. That's why she's been fighting the campaign in the way that she has. She wants to fight it as she would govern, which is by bringing the party together as one, unifying all the different parts of our party. And I think that's what she'll do.
Alicia Kearns, we'll find out soon enough, won't we? Appreciate your time. Thanks very much indeed. It's just gone 5 o'clock. Coming up, it's the last four candidates, remaining candidates, for the party members to decide. We'll bring you the latest on what the running order looks like for the next leader of the Conservative Party and ultimately Prime Minister. There you go. There are the hopefuls. If you're listening on the radio, you know who they are. Who's for the chop this time? Not him. Also, Boris Johnson flew in an RAF fighter jet. Pictures released this morning, extraordinary pictures, having fun it seems, but he might be in for a sharp drop as his government faces a vote of no confidence in the House of Commons. That was scheduled to happen at 4:30. It's not happened yet. Any moment now we'll take you there live. In the admittedly unlikely event of a Conservative defeat, a general election would be triggered. The latest on all the political rumblings before 6 o'clock, including the thoughts of young Conservative supporters on who they see as the right person to lead their party. Also, can't get away from it, red alert for extreme weather is in place across England and an amber warning for Wales and southern Scotland, temperatures reaching the high 30s. The heat is causing disruption on public transport, passengers being told not to travel unless they really have to. The travel editor at The Independent, Simon Calder, will give us his take on what's happening. And let us know how hot it is where you are, how you're coping, or indeed enjoying the heat. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. With me for the next hour, the journalist and author Ella Whelan. But first, we've got the latest news headlines with Polly.
Colin, thank you. Well, regarding that extreme heat across the UK, flights at Luton Airport near London have been suspended due to the heat, causing a problem with the runway. Let's just take you live to the House of Commons to hear from the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. He's making a statement ahead of the confidence vote on the government later this evening.
Order. Might be just helpful. It's actually the government that's put it down for today.
He wants one, Mr. Speaker, and since they want one, well, it's his constitutional prerogative. We will comply, and we will win, Mr. Speaker. But I'll tell him why I believe this is one of the most dynamic governments of modern times. Not just overcoming adversity on a scale we haven't seen for centuries, but delivering throughout adversity. And if he wants evidence of the temper and mettle of this government, I would remind him of how we began when Parliament was deadlocked and he was shadow Brexit Secretary, Mr. Speaker, and Labour were the first opposition in history to be absolutely petrified of calling a general election. And when they finally capitulated and agreed to submit to the verdict of the people, we sent the great blue Tory ferret so far up their left trouser leg they couldn't move. We won the biggest Conservative victory since 1987, the biggest share of the vote since 1979. We won seats they never dreamed of losing, and we, from Wrexham to Workington, from Bishop Auckland to Barrow, we turned red car, blue car, Mr. Speaker. We saw 54 seats go straight from Labour to Tory, and we won by 80 seats, Mr. Speaker. And then we worked flat out to repay that trust. With iron determination, we saw off Brenda Hale, and we got Brexit done. And though the rejoiners and the revengers were left plotting and planning and biding their time, and I will have more to say about the events of the last few weeks and months in due course, we delivered on every single one of our promises. No, Mr. Speaker, let me make some progress. We took back control of our money. We took back control of our borders. And we installed a points-based system for immigration. We took back control of our laws. We on this side of the House took back the sovereign right of the British people to determine their own laws and their own future in Parliament. And for that, I say to colleagues on this side of the House, your place in history is secure. And I say to the honourable gentleman, it will never be forgotten that 48 times he tried to overturn the will of the people. 48 times he tried to strike down the biggest expression of popular will, it will be remembered, in the history of this country. And be in no doubt, if he were ever to come to power, Mr. Speaker, with his hopeless coalition of Liberal Democrats and Scottish nationalists, he would try to do so again at the drop of a hat. And it was only a month or so later that the government was forced to show its resolve again, when we began to lose lives, thousands of lives, in the worst pandemic for a century. A pandemic that was global, whose origins we did not fully understand, but were nothing to do with the British people, and if anything, the result of distant misbehaviour involving bats or pangolins, and whose spread was appallingly difficult to manage. And this government never gave up through wave after wave, and thanks to the courage and the indomitable resilience of the British people, we protected our NHS, we saved thousands of lives, and we were finally rescued by the genius of British scientists and by a vaccine that was licensed faster than any vaccine in the world, and a rollout that was faster than any comparable country, and faster, of course, than we would have achieved if we'd listened to the Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Speaker. So fast that the EU Commission actually tried to expropriate 5 million doses of Astra to try to slow us down, it can be told. And yes, shame is right. And still they failed. And insofar as the opposition came up with any ideas at all, they would quaveringly call for more lockdowns. Well, we trusted to British science and to the vaccine rollout. They vacillated, we vaccinated, and we vaccinated so fast We came out of lockdown quicker than any other European country. And when I look at that achievement, Mr. Speaker, I tell you, I have confidence in this government and in what it can do. And as a direct result of the actions of the government, we had the fastest growth in the G7 last year, and that is why we are able now to help people across the country with the latest challenge. The global inflation in energy prices, triggered partly by post-COVID blockages, but made far worse by Putin's vile war in Ukraine. And it's because we have sensibly managed the economy that we have the fiscal firepower to give the most vulnerable households, 8 million of them, £1,200, £400 to help every household with the cost of energy. And we can do that because our economic fundamentals are strong, with British companies hiring talent up and down the country. Yes, with unemployment at or near a 50-year low, with 620,000 more people in payroll employment than there were before the pandemic began, and youth unemployment at or near a 45-year low. And with people coming off benefits and getting into work, 500,000 of them just in the 6 months to June. And that is the fundamental difference between this government and the opposition. We believe that the best answer to poverty is not benefits, that's what they think. We think the best answer is the security and happiness and dignity that goes with a job. And I am proud of what we have done throughout the last 3 years to champion working people, lifting the living wage, cutting tax for those on universal credit, and just in the last couple of weeks, the biggest tax cut in 10 years for the vast majority of people on lower incomes who pay national insurance contributions. And that's why, and I'll give you a fact, Mr. Speaker. That's why today, under this government, the poorer households in this country get more of their income from their earnings, and under Labour, they got more of their income from benefits. That's the reality of the difference between them and us. There has never been a Labour government that left office with unemployment lower than when it came in. And that, Mr. Speaker, is why I have confidence in Her Majesty's government. In spite of the pandemic, we did not, for a moment, I will give way to my honourable friend.
I'm grateful to my right honourable friend for giving way. And I personally think that our party is making the same mistake that the Labour Party made when they knifed Tony Blair. But may I say to my honourable friend, is he aware that the excess death rates in Europe show that thanks to his early intervention with the vaccine, fewer people died in the United Kingdom than the majority of other European countries. And thanks to my right honourable friend's intervention, Kiev is still a part of Ukraine and not a part of Russia.
I thank him very much, and I think he's absolutely right in what he says about the record of the NHS, the record of this country in beating back COVID, and what a pity it was that the right honourable gentleman opposite, the leader of the opposition, came so many times to this place and said that we had the worst record in Europe. He's never taken it back, Mr. Speaker. Perhaps he'll do so in the course of the debate to come. In spite of that pandemic, in a moment, we did not for a moment lose our focus on those huge manifesto commitments that we made in 2019, beginning with making our streets safer, and with the help of now 13,576 more police, and we will hit 20,000 by 2024. We have rounded up those county lines, drugs gangs, 1,500 of them so far, and we will continue. We've taken thousands of knives off the streets of our country, using stop and search, Mr. Speaker. Using stop and search. And I know that people on Labour benches oppose stop and search, but I think it is the kindest and most loving thing you can do when someone is going equipped with a bladed weapon to take that knife off him, Mr. Speaker. and it was by tough policing, giving the police the powers that they deserve, and putting more out on the street, we've helped to get neighbourhood crime down by 31%. And as we promised, we've invested massively in our amazing NHS. We got the nurses into the hospitals, I think another 10,000 this year on last year. We're on track to recruit 50,000. We have record numbers of people working now in our NHS, Mr. Speaker, tackling the COVID backlogs. And at the same time, we're getting on with our long-term programme of improvement of our National Health Service. And they constantly say that we're not going to build 40 new hospitals, Mr. Speaker. Well, I can tell him that we are. And they will be done by 2030, and he will, if he's still around in 2024, he will see measurable improvement. And I'll tell you something else, Mr. Speaker. 75 years after the foundation of the NHS, we have been the first government to have the nerve and a plan to fix the gulf between the NHS and social care. Ending the cruel lottery that brings destitution on families with a member suffering from dementia. Governments have promised it for decades. We did it, Mr. Speaker, and we're raising the funding to do it, which they opposed. And of course, we've been investing massively in our schools and young people, introducing hundreds of thousands of kids to tutoring. The kind of tutoring, kids who have potential, kids who are in danger of being left behind, the kind of tutoring that is currently only available to those whose parents can pay for it. And in making, I'm going to give way to my former opponent, the Right Honourable Member for Islington North.
I'm grateful to the Prime Minister for taking a break from his fantasy tour of this country. Could he take one moment to explain why 14 million people in this country are living in poverty, why there are more food banks than there are branches of McDonald's, why there is a mental health crisis, why Big Pharma have made so much out of owning the patents of the vaccines, why his government is presiding over the enriching of the richest, the impoverishment of the poorest, and the greatest job insecurity in industry after industry. He has created poverty, inequality, and insecurity. That is his legacy.
Well, I'm thrilled to be debating again with the right honourable gentleman, and since our last encounters, I can tell him I am proud that we've actually got unemployment down to at or no record lows. I know that he'd rather have people on benefits, but I don't think that's the way forward, Mr. Speaker. And he talks about 14 million people. Let me tell him. 40 million people voted, 14 million people voted for this Conservative government, and this Conservative government is undefeated at the polls, and never let that be forgotten. Of course, at the same time, just a moment, we've been investing massively in schools, as I say, and it's by making our streets and our communities safer, by making our population healthier, by ensuring that our kids are literate and numerate at the age of 11, and our goal is to get up to 90% by 11 rather than the current 65%, Mr. Speaker. We've been driven throughout this last 3 years by a very simple vision. We Conservatives believe that there is genius and talent everywhere, and energy and imagination distributed in every corner of this country. But we don't think that's the same for opportunity, Mr. Speaker. And our immense programme of levelling up is driven by the simple mathematical observation. If per capita GDP, productivity were evenly distributed in the UK as they are in our major competitors, then this would be by some way the most prosperous economy in Europe. And of course it would also be the morally right thing to do, Mr. Speaker. And that's why we've kept going with the most colossal infrastructure programme ever seen. 3 new high-speed rail lines, Mr. Speaker. And by the way, how many miles of electrified line did Labour build in their 13 years of office? Anybody know? Virtually none. Hundreds of miles of road improvements we're putting in, massive investments in buses, in cycling, and of course, We gave people, and we are giving people, the skills, the lifetime skills guarantee that means the government will support you to get an A-level equivalent skill when you're an adult. And Mr. Speaker, we're also giving them the technology to use those skills throughout the country. Gigabit broadband, I am proud to say, now sprouts through every wainscot, or virtually every wainscot. We've gone from 7% to 69% coverage in this brief 3 years, and it's only by putting in the infrastructure. She says they don't have Wi-Fi in the north, Mr. Speaker. Let me say, it is this government, that's what she said, it is this government that is putting in Wi-Fi across the whole. How little she knows of the very area she purports to represent. It's only by putting in the infrastructure that you enable people to live where they want. And I'm proud that not only are we seeing record numbers of homes being built, last year there were 400,000 first-time buyers. Because unlike the party opposite, we believe in home ownership. We believe in getting people on the property ladder. They don't like it. You can tell they don't like it, Mr. Speaker. And the better the infrastructure, the skills, the technology, the less 400,000 first-time buyers. The less intrusive the regulation in our country, the more the investment flows in. And we're seeing huge sums come in now from the private sector. Every other week there is another £1 billion unicorn, not just in London or Oxford or Cambridge, but across the whole country. We have more tech investment than France and Germany and Israel combined. And now, in the first quarter of this year, in attracting tech venture capital, we've actually overtaken the Chinese, Mr. Speaker, with 12.5 billion coming in. And this government will continue to make the UK the place to come for the industries and the businesses of the future. This year, Newquay will join Cape Kennedy and Baikonur as a functioning spaceport, I'm proud to say. And for the first time ever, under this government, a British satellite will be launched into space from Britain. And next year, the spaceport in Shetland will roar into life thanks to the investments of Lockheed Martin and others as local crofters, and I mean humble crofters, Mr. Speaker, almost as humble and local as the right honourable gentleman opposite, have withdrawn their opposition because they can see that it means jobs and growth for their area. And people in this House may not know it, but this government has made an investment in low Earth orbit satellites, and it was a risk, hundreds of them. But it has paid off for the taxpayer, and hundreds of them are now circling the Earth, offering all sorts of opportunities, including the potential for internet connections for the people of sub-Saharan Africa. And I will give way one last time to the honourable gentleman there.
I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman. It is highly unconventional to put down a confidence motion in his own government, though I suppose he's an unconventional person, since only an unconventional man would want the opportunity to speak at his own funeral. So can I ask him, though, isn't his essential problem, despite all this litany that he thinks are his fantasy achievements, the bottom line is this government, this country is supposed to operate on the good chap theory of government, but it doesn't operate when there's a bad apple at the core.
Mr. Speaker, I think, if he is saying that he is going to vote for confidence in this government, I will certainly welcome his support. But what I can tell him is that I believe that the achievements of this government over the last 3 years, I think, have been very remarkable. And as for his personal criticism of me, I am proud of what we have done, and I am proud of the way that I've been able to offer leadership in difficult times. Let me put it that way. I think that investment in the low Earth orbit satellites has paid off, and as I said, that people in sub-Saharan Africa now have the chance to get internet connection. It's a massive success for global Britain, and people around the world can now see the renewed ambition of this country. The record £22 billion we're investing to become a science superpower again, the new Advanced Research and Innovation Agency, and of course at the same time the scientific solutions that we are providing are helping to solve the fundamental problems facing humanity. And on this sweltering day, let me just remind the House, there are very few governments in the world that could have organised a COP26 summit so far-reaching in its impacts. And I thank my right honourable friend and colleague, the member for Reading, for what he did, committing 90% of the world to net zero by 2050, moving the world beyond the use of coal, moving from fossil fuel cars to EVs, planting billions of trees around the world, and launching the Clean Green Initiative, as we did at Carbis Bay, by which G7 governments will now leverage the trillions of the private sector to help the developing world to use the clean green technologies that offer economic as well as environmental salvation. And I think people around the world can see more clearly than ever before that we have in this country, and I think in this House, a renewed willingness as global Britain to stand up for freedom and democracy. And you could have no better proof of that than our campaign to help the Ukrainians. And if it is true that I'm more popular on the streets of Kiev right now than I am in Kensington, if that is because of the foresight and boldness of this government in becoming the first European country to send them weapons, a decision that was made possible by the biggest investment in defence since the Cold War. And though I think that conflict will continue to be very hard, and I think our thoughts and prayers must continue to be with the people of Ukraine. I do believe that they must win and that they will win. And though there may be, of course, a massive strategic importance in the face of Putin's adventurism and aggression, when the people of Ukraine have won, it will also be a victory of right over wrong and of good over evil. And I think this government saw that clearly and saw it whole and saw it faster than many other parts of the world. And that, Mr. Speaker, is why I have confidence in this government. By the way, I have absolutely zero confidence in the opposition. I don't think... Eight of them voted down. I know Tara is saying this, and you must say this, everybody must say this right until the election. 8 of them, including the Shadow Foreign Secretary, voted to discard this country's independent nuclear weapon, Mr. Speaker. I don't believe they would have done the same thing in standing up to Putin in a month of Sundays, Mr. Speaker. Last week I went up in one of our 148 Typhoon fighters, and I flew out over the North Sea, Mr. Speaker. I flew out over Doggerland, the drowned prairies that are now being harvested again with tens of gigawatts of clean green energy. We will have 50 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2050. And thanks to this government's activism, I'm proud to say that offshore wind is now cheaper than onshore wind. And, I look down at that ghostly white forest of windmills in the sea, financed, by the way, with ever-growing sums from international investors. And I thought, this is how we are going to fix our energy problems. This is how Europe should be ending its dependence on Putin's gas. And I am proud of the way we have responded to the challenge. A nuclear reactor every year, Mr. Speaker, rather than one every 10 years or none at all, as was the ridiculous policy, the catastrophic policy of the last Labour government. And then the wing commander interrupted me. And he, for a glorious period, I was at the controls of the Typhoon, and I did a loop-the-loop and an aileron roll and a barrel roll. And then, I'm coming to the point, Mr. Speaker, I handed back the controls. And in a few weeks' time, that is exactly what I will do with this great party of ours. And after 3 dynamic and exhilarating years in the cockpit, we will find a new leader and we will coalesce in loyalty around him or her. And the vast twin Rolls-Royce engines of our Tory message, our Conservative values and beliefs will roar on, Mr. Speaker. Strong public services on the left, and a dynamic free market enterprise economy on the right, each boosting the other and developing trillions of pounds of thrust. And the reason we keep winning is that we are the only party that understands the need for both. And whatever happens in this contest, we will continue to fight for the lowest possible taxes and the lightest possible regulation. And their problem, Mr. Speaker, is that they would try to fly on one engine, endlessly kowtowing to the union barons, endlessly inflicting more tax and more spending, endlessly giving in to the temptation to regulate us back into the orbit of the European Union and flying round in circles. And some people will say, as I leave office, that this is the end of... They will say this is the end of Brexit. They will, oh yes, listen to deathly hush. Deathly hush. And the leader of the opposition and the deep state will prevail in its plot to haul us back into alignment with the EU as a prelude to our eventual return. And we on this side of the House will prove them wrong, won't we? And some people will say that this is the end of our support. Some people say that this is the end of our support for Ukraine. And I'm told that is exactly the analysis, the Champagnskier corks have allegedly been popping in the Kremlin. Just as the Islington lefties are toasting each other with their favourite Kir Waiao, Mr. Speaker. Well, I have no doubt that whoever takes over in a few weeks' time will make sure that we keep together the global coalition in support of our Ukrainian friends. And some people will say that my departure, I think it was the leader of the opposition himself who said it, the leader of my departure means the eventual victory of the Labour Party. And I believe this side of the House will prove him totally wrong. And in due course, we will walk the honourable member for Holborn and St Pancras into that capsule in Newquay that I have talked about earlier and sent him into orbit where he belongs. And, Mr. Speaker, I tell my right honourable friend, the member for the Scots Nationalists, that it is time that he takes his protein pill and puts his helmet on, Mr. Speaker, because it won't be long, I hear, before his own party is taking him to Shetland, I should say, and propelling him to the heavens. Mr. Speaker, this government has fought some of the hardest yards in modern political history. We've had to take some of the bleakest decisions since the war, and I believe that we got the big calls right. And at the end of 3 years, this country is visibly using its newfound independence to turbocharge our natural advantages as the best place in the world, not just to live and to invest, but to bring up a family. And with a new and incontrovertible spirit of global leadership, I believe that we can look to the future with a rock-solid confidence, not just in what this government has done, but in what it will do and will continue to do. And I commend this motion to the House.
The question is that this House has confidence in Her Majesty's government. We will wait and see. But there we are. I now call the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer, to respond.
Mr. Speaker, the delusion is never ending. What a relief.
what a relief for the country that they finally got round to sacking him. And in many ways, the chaos of the last fortnight is familiar. The third Tory leadership contest in 6 years. The latest bumper summer for graphic designers and brand managers. The latest parade of pretenders promising unfunded tax cuts. Latest set of ministerial jobs handed out on a wink and a shake in return for a nomination. And TV debates so embarrassing that even the contestants are pulling out. Every other year they switch out a failed Prime Minister. It's like a once secure Premier League side burning through managers as they slide inevitably towards relegation. But, Mr. Speaker, the end of the season can't come soon enough. But besides the déjà vu, things are different this time. David Cameron left office because he lost a referendum. The Right Honourable Member for Maidenhead left office because her party could not agree on how to leave the EU. There were serious policy and political disagreements. And on how to grow the economy, how to run our public services, the Labour Party had our own profound disagreements with both former Prime Ministers. But no one seriously disputed that they were fit for office, that they could be trusted to carry out their own. I suggest some of those on the opposite side reread their resignation letters. No one seriously disputed that they were fit for office, that they could be trusted to carry out their responsibilities, that the information they gave their ministers was true to the best of their knowledge, and the policies they proposed were the ones that they believed were best for the country. So no one objected to them staying on whilst a successor was found. Not at the moment. Now, there clearly are policy disagreements between the Prime Minister and his party. I know he spent the weekend throwing another party. It's obviously a very good party from the last 20 minutes. But can I suggest to use his catch-up TV to see what they've been saying in the leadership debates? The Foreign Secretary says the Prime Minister's economic policy is not going to drive economic growth. She's left now. The member for Portsmouth North says they've left public services in a state of disrepair. Agreed. And the member for Saffron Walden says junior ministers raised concerns about fraud that were ignored and cost the taxpayer £17 billion. That's on that side. This is what they're saying, Prime Minister, in the leadership debates. So the people behind him are not happy with his record, whatever they say and jeer now. But unlike his predecessors, this Prime Minister has not been forced out over policy disagreements, and despite the delusions he's fostered in his bunker, he's not been felled by the stampede of an eccentric herd. Instead, he's been forced out in disgrace. Judged by his colleagues and peers to be unworthy of his position and unfit for his office. He promoted someone he knew to be a sexual predator. Might be an idea to listen. And then denied all knowledge when that inevitably went wrong. He lied to his ministers about what he knew and allowed them to repeat those lies to the country. It's the same pattern of behaviour that we saw when he and his mates partied through lockdown, denied it for months, and forced his ministers to repeat those lies until he was found out. He can't change. Even last week, he was tearing up the rules by insisting that an opposition motion of no confidence could not be heard. He promoted an ally to the ministerial payroll as she literally gave the public the middle finger. and he appointed a Chancellor with questions to answer about tax avoidance and his personal finances. They all know. They all know. They all know. They all know.
Some point of order. Mr. Speaker, the Chair has been very clear at times about being conscious of language. Now, from my understanding, the Right Honourable Member for Stratford-upon-Avon, to whom I think the Right Honourable Learned Gentleman is referring to, has denied that accusation. Perhaps you could guide the Right Honourable Learned Gentleman as to temperaments of language.
What I would say is I want everybody to think carefully about what they say in this chamber and the effects it has on people, and it does concern. But also it's better if neither the clerks or myself can hear a lot of what's going on. So if you can just turn it down so we can hear. Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. They all know it can't go on. Just read their resignation letters. The member for South West Wiltshire went after saying this is the last straw in the rolling chaos. The member for Cheltenham had enough of defending the indefensible. And the member for Bolsover simply said the Prime Minister was an apologist for someone who has committed sexual assault. When the Right Honourable Member for Richmond resigned, he accused the Prime Minister of not conducting government properly, competently or seriously. I presume he was talking about the appalling joint economic legacy, the highest inflation and the lowest growth in the G7, leaving us with the highest tax burden since rationing and diminished public services. That's the record. The rhetoric doesn't match it. He suggested the Prime Minister is not prepared to work hard or take difficult decisions, and he implied that the Prime Minister cannot tell the public the truth. They all read the letter. They know what he said. But this week, the Right Honourable Member for Richmond is trying to convince us to ignore all that. Apparently he's changed his mind. Asked a straight question, he won't tell his party that the Prime Minister is dishonest. And now he's saying the Prime Minister is actually a remarkable man with a good heart. Pathetic. There can be no one worse placed to rebuild the economy than the man who broke it. There can be no one worse placed to restore trust than the man who propped up this totally untrustworthy Prime Minister. I'll make some progress, then I will. Well, instead of rewriting history, members opposite need to face up to what they've done, what they've put this country through. Despite knowing exactly who he is, despite knowing that he always puts himself before anyone else, despite knowing that he'd been fired from job after job for lying, they elected him to lead their party. And he behaved exactly as everyone feared when he got into Downing Street. He lurched from one scandal to the next. He demeaned his office. And he started to drag everyone and everything down with him. So belatedly, they found him unfit for office, too untrustworthy for government. I'll give way.
The Honourable Gentleman, the Right Honourable Gentleman, sounds like he's describing his own actions, when for year after year he sat there while the Labour Party were found guilty of breaching the law by the ECHR on the anti-Semitism of the Honourable Member for England North. Why didn't he have the courage to stand up at the time and stand up for what's right? Apologise, Peter. Apologise.
I wonder if he actually realises why we're having this debate. It's because It's because so many...
Just a moment.
You've lost it, mate. You've lost it.
Mr. Holden quite rightly asked the question, and also, like yourself, would like to hear the answers. Let's move on.
We're having this debate because dozens of frontbenchers resigned their posts because they wouldn't serve this Prime Minister. They're sacking him because he's untrustworthy. That's why we're having this debate. Normally in a debate like this, the Prime Minister is asking for a vote of confidence so he can carry on. This one's already...
Order. I'm very bothered about where this is going. The use of language needs to be brought into a more temperate manner, and what I would like to say is we need to calm it down. You know, and let's see how we can try and progress in a more orderly way, but more temperate in what we're saying. Keir Starmer.
So, Mr. Speaker, why are they leaving him with his hands on the levers of power for 8 weeks? 8 weeks where the British public must trust the word of a Prime Minister who's been sacked because he can't be trusted. 8 weeks where Britain will be represented abroad by someone who's lost all respect at home. 8 weeks of a caretaker government led by an utterly careless Prime Minister. And anyone who thinks that doesn't matter, that this is just a quiet summer months where everyone goes to the beach, is in denial about the severity of the challenges our country faces. The war in eastern Ukraine drags on. The Nord Stream pipeline has been shut down. Flights are being cancelled left, right and centre. Britain is facing an unprecedented heat wave as our climate changes in our very eyes. These are serious... Mr. Speaker, they don't think that these are challenges. These are serious issues that will require serious leadership. Hard decisions will have to be made. This is not the summer for Downing Street to be occupied by a vengeful squatter mired in scandal. Mr. Speaker, every day they leave him there. Every hustings they refuse to distance themselves from his appalling behaviour. And every vote they cast today to prop him up is a dereliction of duty.
You don't like it, do you? Disgrace.
It's a reminder, Mr. Speaker, that the Prime Minister has only been able to do what he's done because he's enabled by a corrupted Conservative Party every step, every scandal and every party along the way. Mr. Speaker, I know there's been fear-mongering that this motion might lead straight to a general election. Sadly, that's complete nonsense, but you can see why they fear the electorate. After 12 years of failed Tory government, Britain is stuck with a low-growth economy, stuck at home, unable to get a passport or a flight, stuck on the phone trying to get a GP appointment. Our taxes are going up, food and energy bills are out of control, and the public services we rely on have simply stopped working. And every Tory standing to lead their party has given up on trying to defend Prime Minister. They have no confidence in you. That's why you're going.
Really are struggling to hear. Now, I want to be able to hear, then we can make better judgment calls. Both the clerks and myself are struggling. And all I would say is, please, can we calm it down and think about what we're saying? Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Britain deserves a fresh start with Labour. Free from those who got us stuck in the first place. Free from the chaotic Tory party. Free from those that propped up this Prime Minister for months and months. And here's the difference. Under my leadership, the Labour Party has changed. And we're ready to do the same for the country too, to get our economy growing, to revitalise our public services. And after this Prime Minister has damaged everything around him, to clean up politics. This House should make a start by voting no confidence in this Prime Minister this evening. Thank you, Mr.
Father of the House, Sir Peter Bottomley.
Mr. Speaker, in June 2016, there was a vote of no confidence in the then leader of the Labour Party. I don't know whether the present leader of the Labour Party voted yes or voted no. Did he vote confidence in his predecessor, or did he vote no confidence in his predecessor? If he can remember. In 2019, his predecessor moved a motion of no confidence in the government, saying the issue should be put to the people. It was put to the people. There was a general election in 2019, and the present government came in with a majority of 80. And I have it on reasonable authority that the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party has said today that Boris was, in effect, the magic which helped. I'm glad she's confirmed that. The issue before the House now is whether people would have any more confidence in the Labour Party becoming a government. And the answer is no. If we can return, Mr. Speaker, to that no confidence vote in June 2016, when the leader of the Labour Party lost by 172 to 40, and the 40 may have included the Honourable.
That is where we leave the Father of the House, Peter Bottomley, on his feet in relation to that debate. Vote of no confidence in the Prime Minister Boris Johnson's government, but actually became the occasion almost of Boris Johnson writing his own political obituary, describing in a pretty full way what his legacy will be, perhaps lending credibility to the idea that that was the last appearance at the dispatch box of Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. It certainly all had an air of finality about it, and some rancour as well. Let's turn to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Darren, I'll just draw our viewers and listeners' attention to one other thing as well. In terms of the leadership hopefuls, Liz Truss, Foreign Secretary, cheek by jowl with the Prime Minister, sitting right next to him. There'll be Conservative activists voting. I know that where you are, the MPs are voting and have been voting since 5 o'clock for the next leader. But there'll be activists looking at that imagery of Liz Truss sitting next to the Prime Minister. It was a vote of confidence in the government. She could have been whipping her supporters. No, she was there.
Yeah, really, really interesting. A very, very deliberate signal from Liz Truss. As we've heard during those TV debates, that she is someone who she would argue has been loyal to Boris Johnson. She did not clearly resign as Foreign Secretary. That she essentially has time and time again shown that loyalty, and that is very much on show today. It is not then a coincidence, is it, Colin, that in many ways she's got the tacit agreement of number 10. You may remember only last week, two key lieutenants of Boris Johnson, Nadine Dorries and Jacob Rees-Mogg, emerged from Downing Street to go to a camera in the street and said that they were backing Liz Truss for leader. But my word, if you like your politics, what an entertaining, 45, 50 minutes that was. Lots of noise and bluster. A pretty bullish Prime Minister in Boris Johnson, as you say, setting out his case for his legacy in many regards about what he feels that they achieved in government, whether that was in support for Ukraine, tackling the pandemic, getting Brexit done. This is a Prime Minister who, is very much arguing that Parliament should have confidence in him, even though we're in this peculiar situation in which we're having this vote, which almost certainly the Parliament will demonstrate it has got confidence in Boris Johnson, but of course he is resigning as Prime Minister in a matter of weeks anyway. Though he did interest at one stage after talking about how the blue Conservative ferret was so far up the trouser leg of the opposition they couldn't move. But he did say that he's going to reveal in the weeks and months to come of what the Remainers were behind his downfall. Rather interesting. I do suspect that Boris Johnson will be returning to his old profession of newspaper columnist as soon as he can when he leaves office in September. Of course, Keir Starmer making the case that dozens of frontbench resignations, kept reminding MPs to read those letters about why Boris Johnson was unfit to govern, is the reason they're having this debate today. Also peculiar to a large degree that Boris Johnson decided to take an intervention from Jeremy Corbyn, of all people. So, as I say, lots of rough and tumble in the political debate in the chamber. lots of noise, lots of interventions, lots of Lindsay Hall telling everyone to calm down and use moderate language. But ultimately, at the end of the day, this is a debate that's not going to, frankly, go anywhere, given the fact that the government, irrespective of Boris Johnson's got a stonky majority, and those MPs do not want a general election. And you're also right in pointing out that most of the attention is actually in places like this, here in Portcullis House in the heart of Parliament, where MPs are scurrying upstairs to the committee corridor to vote in the third round of that election, vote for the Conservative leader. Polling closes in just over an hour. We'll get the result, Colin, around 8 p.m. Almost certain Tom Tugendhat's going to get knocked out. Be fascinating. This thing to watch out for, fascinating, where Suella Braverman's votes go in that contest. Do they break for Labour's trust, or could some of them go to Kemi Badenoch? Be really, really, really interesting. That's to watch out for from 8 p.m. onwards.
Darren, thanks very much indeed. Just get the brief thoughts of Ella Whelan, who's alongside me here in the studio, in the sweltering studio.
What we want out of this...
they're still going, by the way, in the House of Commons, as you can see. Ella, just a detail, but it struck me, there was Boris Johnson briefly referring to the deep state. And there was Keir Starmer talking about the Prime Minister's lies. Of course, he can say something like that under the protection of parliamentary privilege. But it struck me that actually, not so very long ago, those two phrases you wouldn't have heard in Parliament. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, very, very odd. You're more likely to hear them on YouTube. I really, don't really understand that. But I think that was, what a speech. Whether or not you, that you can unpick it, and a lot of the content was sort of bluster. We know. I think actually it was quite smart of Boris Johnson to take that contribution from Jeremy Corbyn, who really robustly challenged him actually, and lots of what he said was true. But of course didn't have a whisper of a cheer from his own party, because the Labour Party, while it's criticising the Tories for eating each other live on national television, is clearly still extremely divided and divisive.
Itself, isn't it? Ella, I'm going to cut you off because I want to we haven't got much time. I want to get some other voices away. And they are Anna McGovern, the president of Queen Mary University Conservative Society, and here in the studio, Daniel Dieppe, who's the president of the University of Nottingham Conservative Association. We've invited them because as young Conservatives looking to the future, there's a lot to talk about, isn't there? Daniel, what do you make of it all?
I thank my right honourable friend.
Yeah. In fact, Daniel, hold on, because we haven't got a camera for you. We've got a camera for Anna McGovern. Anna, what do you make of it all?
That was a very full-on debate. I haven't actually seen Boris Johnson in such good form for quite a long time, actually. And I think if he'd been like that, there could have actually been hope. But no one could trust in him because of all the scandal, hypocrisy, lies and dishonesty throughout his time as Prime Minister. But no one can deny that whether you love him, hate him, you know himself, he is a very good public speaker. But unfortunately, because of all of his actions, no one has any faith in him anymore.
Daniel Dieppe, what did you make of that? What felt like a valedictory address? This is Boris Johnson signing off from being Prime Minister.
Yes, it was an extraordinarily charismatic speech from Boris Johnson, showing us the absolute best of his character traits. But I think Keir Starmer actually rightly pointed out some of his flaws. He had to go. The cabinet did not have confidence in him, and I supported Boris Johnson going because I don't think he showed a conviction in Conservative principles, so he had to go, and it's good he's done that.
Daniel, just while we've got the two of you, if you had a vote in the leadership election, who would get yours? Daniel?
I would go for Kemi Badenoch. She's the only candidate who has shown her Conservative convictions.
OK, that's clear. Anna McGovern, you?
Unfortunately, none of them. For some that offer incredible qualities, there are severe caveats attached to them. My original choice would have been Kemi. However, her support of lockdowns and the vaccine passports and her husband's role as the head of transformation
Anna, we're going to leave it there. We're going to leave it right there. Stay with us. Nana Acquia is next. Much more politics, if that's your thing.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. The heat that we're expecting on Monday night and Tuesday is very far from typical summer hot spell kind of weather. This is unprecedented, record-breaking heat. It's come up from the south and temperatures have risen during Monday. A very hot day widely. Tuesday is going to be significantly hotter in many places, and there's little cool down overnight on Monday night. Some cloud into the north and the west, some showers into the northwest of Scotland, where it will be cooler, but across much of the night, temperatures remaining in virtually all of the UK, high teens, low 20s, and in some spots, mid-20s. So the fact that we've had that heat build up through the day and then very difficult to cool down overnight, very difficult to get fresh air into people's homes, and of course our homes aren't built to cool down. Well, that's what makes this heat so concerning. Temperatures shooting up then on Tuesday with peaks of mid to high 30s widely from southern Scotland into much of England and Wales, and 40 or 41 Celsius is possible from London to Lincolnshire.